You know, when you look back on history, major conflicts get these really epic, powerful names, right? The Battle of Waterloo, Trafalgar. But according to the source material we're digging into today, when future generations study the current US-Iran conflict, they're going to call it something, well, something very different.
Yeah, Battle of Clowns. It's a heavy hitter of a claim, so let's just jump right in. The core argument from our source is that this entire conflict is a masterclass in failure. We're talking a total lack of strategy, zero humility, and, as they put it so bluntly, absolutely no brains. It's a pretty shocking premise, so let's see how they back it up.
So, the first piece of evidence the source points to is this complete and utter disconnect from reality. For weeks, the White House has been telling everyone it's negotiating a peace deal. But then Iran's foreign ministry goes public and says, we haven't had any direct talks in over a month. So, according to the source, the president has basically been negotiating a peace treaty with himself.
And this kind of talk is exactly what the source is talking about. They pull this quote, which they attribute to the press secretary. I mean, read that. It sounds less like diplomacy and more like a casual threat to just wipe another government off the face of the earth. This really sets the stage for a conflict that's not about negotiation, it's just about brute force. But brute force to achieve what, exactly? This brings us to the next big part of the source's critique, the argument that this is a war being fought without any clear, coherent objective at all.
So, what is the goal of all this? According to the source, when Senator Marco Rubio was asked, the objectives sounded pretty clear: destroy their air force, sink their navy, and bomb their missile factories. You know, on paper, that looks like a pretty standard military plan. Break the enemy's stuff so they can't fight back.
But the source immediately throws up a red flag here. Are those military tactics really the end goals? Is that the whole story? Because when you start to look at what's not being said, some pretty huge pieces of the puzzle seem to be missing.
And this is where it starts to get really weird. What about all the reasons we were told this was happening in the first place? The source points out there's suddenly no talk about securing the oil or stopping the nuclear program or that whole regime change thing. And this is the big one, what about opening the Strait of Hormuz? It's like the main justifications just evaporated.
And this all leads to what the source calls the ultimate irony. They cite a Wall Street Journal report claiming the plan is to just bomb Iran and then pull out, leaving the Strait of Hormuz totally closed. If that actually happens, it would be a massive blow to American influence and, frankly, a huge strategic win for Iran.
So this lack of a clear endgame is one thing, but the situation on the ground, says the source, is even worse. They detail a series of pretty shocking military losses that have basically left the U.S. technologically deaf and blind in the region.
Okay, first, let's just quickly get what we're talking about here. The E-3 Sentry. You can think of it as the quarterback of the Air Force. It's a flying command center. It's an incredibly valuable, really hard-to-replace piece of tech. And then there's this, the EC-130H Compass Call. This plane's job is to jam enemy communications, basically making them deaf and dumb on the battlefield. And get this, the source notes that the U.S. military has a grand total of just 5 of these planes. For the whole military. Now just take a look at the math on this, because it's staggering. The source alleges that Iran pulled off these precision strikes on a major airbase and either damaged or destroyed these irreplaceable, multi-million-dollar planes using what are essentially hobby-level drones that cost maybe $20,000 a pop. It's a devastatingly effective and just humiliatingly low-cost blow. So, with its eyes and ears getting knocked out in the Gulf, how's the leadership responding? Well, according to the source, they're not. They're distracted by this totally bizarre sideshow of personal vanity and alleged corruption, which, brings us right back to that whole Battle of Clowns theme. The source points right at the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. They claim he's been busy banning photographers because they were taking unflattering pictures of him. More seriously, they cite a Financial Times report alleging his broker was involved in what looks like textbook insider trading right before the war kicked off. And his response? Apparently, to demand a retraction. And what's the plan coming from the very top? The source lays out what it calls the uranium shovel plan. And yeah, it is exactly as ridiculous as it sounds. They report this is the actual plan. Send in troops to literally dig up radioactive material from bombed-out nuclear sites with shovels. And while all of this is going on, the source claims the bombing campaign is having a devastating effect. Just not on the intended targets.
They report that over 100,000 civilian structures have been hit because Iran's actual military assets are safely tucked away deep inside mountains.
So why should anyone sitting at home care about this strategic mess? Well, the source argues that this circus, as they call it, has a very, very real price tag, and the show is only going to last until the American economy itself just can't take the shockwave anymore. And here is that shockwave. With the Strait of Hormuz closed, models are predicting oil could spike to $200 a barrel. And that's not just a number on a screen. That's the kind of crippling inflation that hits you every single time you fill up your car or buy groceries. It's basically a direct tax on every single one of us.
The economic cost is staggering, but the source argues the human cost is one the leadership simply doesn't seem to care about. The numbers they cite from across the region are just tragic. Tens of thousands dead in Gaza, thousands in Lebanon, thousands more in Iran. These are the real-world consequences of this strategic failure. And this is where these foreign policy decisions start to hit home politically. The source claims that because of all this, Trump's approval rating has absolutely tanked to -17%, making him, by their metric, the most unpopular president in modern American history. And the source points out that while the world's attention is fixed on all this chaos, other actors are making big moves. They highlight that Israel's government has passed a really controversial law allowing the death penalty for any Palestinian labeled a terrorist, a term the source claims is being used pretty broadly. So let's just run down the scorecard after a month of this conflict. According to the source, has a single objective been met? The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Iran's nuclear potential is untouched. The U.S. economy is facing crippling inflation. Meanwhile, America's rivals are getting stronger. It is, by all accounts, a total strategic failure. And the source wraps it all up by putting this reality right next to past promises, reminding everyone that Trump ran as the candidate who'd avoid useless wars and bring peace and prosperity. It's a really stark contrast. So, to sum up all the source material we've just gone through, the argument is that America has been taken for a ride by, in their words, absolute jokers, which leads to their final, pretty damning question for all of us to think about. Is America ever getting out of the Gulf?